Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. Man, that music just gets me going in the morning. I love it. Well, welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and CEO of Let's Talk Supply Chain, as well as the Blended Pledge and the Blended Podcast. And we've got a great show for you today. I finally have Simon from Jaguar Freight on the show, and he's going to come up in just a few minutes. But you might be wondering, I'm not at my regular desk in my regular office. No, that's right. I am in Vegas this morning. I'm here for the Samsara conference. It's called Beyond 26. And it starts tonight. So I'm super excited to be here. Now, let's talk a little bit about our show sponsor. So I want to give a shout out to Secret Society of Supply Chain. Now, if you haven't joined it, it's our free membership group, and we are growing by the day. Lots of really great conversations happening. Lots of people who are looking for jobs. We've got job postings as well that are happening in there, which we love because we love connecting people. Now, I want to give a shout out to some of our newest members. We've got Carlos, Awab, Bensi, Dr. RV, Jean, Todd, Robert, and Kur, Arshraf. We've got Jason, Matt, Andre, Annette, and Highwell. We also have a lot of conversations happening globally, right? You know that we're expanding into Europe and Asia this year. So we've got an Asia channel, we've got a Europe channel, and we're talking about what's happening in those regions. So if you haven't gone to check it out, go to secretsocietyofsupplychain.com and see what we're up to. Now, let's get to what is happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain this week. Sorry, I wasn't quite ready. All right, we've got a brand new episode. Now, this episode I did on site at Home Delivery World with Reveal and Goat Group. And if you haven't checked out Goat Group yet, go and check them out. They've got lots of sneakers. You guys know I love my Air Force Ones. And I had a chance to talk to them at Home Delivery World about their carrier selection strategy, about their carrier strategy. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that later on in the show as well. But we also talked about how to detect anomalies before they show up as costs. And this partnership really showcases how they were able to do that. So wherever you listen and watch the show, go and check out episode 549. As you can see here on letstalksupplychain.com, you can also use our AI interactive podcast experience. You can get an executive summary, main points with timestamps. You can also ask the episode a question. So go check that out as well. And you might have heard we have a brand new show. DC Sfragola is back in the Let's Talk Supply Chain family, and she is hosting Digital Lab. Now, this is where supply chain technology meets reality. And let me tell you, a lot of times we hear about what's happening with technology, right? Who they are, what they do, real life examples of how they help their customers. This is actually going to be a real life visual into how they can actually help you. These are going to be micro demos. Plus, she's going to be talking to the company about how they do everything and what that means to you. So go check that out. Even if you can't attend live, click the attend button and we will send you the recording. Now, where are we going to be? I just mentioned that we're at Samsara, which is Beyond 26 here in Las Vegas. I'm also going to be moderating a panel discussion at the Logistics M&A Club. That's happening in Chicago, September 16th through 17th. If you want to learn more about that, let us know. Send us a message. And then, of course, we've got Manifest happening February 8th through 10th. I'll be back here in Vegas, but this time at the Venetian for Manifest. That's happening February 8th through 10th in Las Vegas. All right. What else is happening? Do we have anything else? I think that's it. I think it's time to bring up our guest for today. But before we do that, we've got to send it over to Camille for the introduction. Over to you.
The freight world sorts people into two camps, those who move things and those who design how things move. Most companies never ask which one they hired. Today's guest has been asking that question since before most of us knew what a bill of lading was. Simon Kaye is third generation. Transportation isn't just what he does, it is what he comes from. In 1993, he and his father founded Jaguar Freight. They opened in New York and London the same year. In 2002, he flew to New York for 1 1 year. His job was to hire the head of the US office. He never moved back. Valley Stream became home. London became the accent he left behind. New York became the decision he kept making. He is president and CEO of Jaguar Freight. He coined and trademarked the phrase freight architect. 3 decades of proof followed. He doesn't believe in moving freight. He believes in designing how it moves. That belief is built into every shipment Jaguar touches. Simon, welcome to Thoughts and Coffee.
Well, isn't that quite an introduction? Thanks, Camille.
That's quite the introduction, and I don't think I left my accent back in London, though.
Oh, we try to make it fun. I mean, supply chain's got to be fun, right? Otherwise,
Absolutely.
we're all going to be on the floor crying because of disruptions. Let's just say that.
One of our fundamentals is keep things fun. We've got to remember, who we are and what we're doing.
I love that. I love that. Now, one of the things I didn't mention at the top of the show, if you are tuning in, I want to know where you're tuning in from. Make sure to put that in the comments because we want to give you a shout out. And if you love our conversation today, we love a good fire emoji. So give us a fire emoji. All right, Simon, welcome to the show. Now, I'm super excited to have you here. It's been a long time coming. You and I have been talking about you being on Thoughts and Coffee for a very, very, very long time. So welcome finally to Thoughts and Coffee.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's great to be here. Our paths have crossed numerous times over the years. But I think this is the first time we have a live interaction streaming. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and we haven't been on stage together before, but we've been to a lot of conferences together. We've been to Manifest, we've been to TPM, so many. And there's so much going on in the industry right now. And so I'm excited to hear your market update. But before we do that, let's get to our poll of the week. Now, the other thing that we did last week, because we ask you guys a question every single Wednesday morning. Now, we had a little bit of fun with this one. And this is where it came from. I was at a mastermind a couple of weeks ago. And one of the questions they asked was, what is going to be the headline in 2030? And each group came up with, I don't know, about 10 each. And some of them were so crazy. And so it really inspired me to ask our community this question and just to have a little bit of fun with it. So it's 2030. You open LinkedIn and see one headline. Which one is it? Well, we had 83 votes. So we had quite a few people having some fun with us this week. 29% of you said ESG goals move to 2040. 22% said aliens are real. 37% said AI runs supply chains. Wow, that's a big percentage. And 12% said lost Bitcoin recovered. Simon, when you saw this, what did you think, and what was your knee-jerk reaction?
My knee-jerk reaction was, oh my gosh, I hope AI isn't going to run supply chains. They're certainly going to be involved with them. I hope they're not going to be running them.
Mm-hmm. Well, think about it, right? 2030 is only 3.5 years away. So, right. AI running supply chains completely, they are running towards some autonomous, features. And so I guess we'll just sort of see how far it can go. The aliens are real was funny. I actually asked the headline to be aliens are real, hybrids exposed. But I guess my teams didn't like the hybrid part, so just put aliens. The one that I thought the ESG goals moved to 2040. I mean, we've already been having discussions about that over the last at least year that I've been seeing. A lot of them were saying 2030 was their goal. It being moved to 2040. So that one I think could actually be more or like one of the realistic.
More realistic. I don't think that's surprising. I think those goalposts keep moving depending on geopolitical events and environmental events. So that's definitely one where I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So true. Well, now's the part of the show where I usually ask you for a market update. We want to know what's going on in the industry. What should we keep an eye on? What's happening in your world? I mean, you're an international freight, so you're dealing with a lot right now.
Sure.
There's a lot of disruptions. There's a lot of supply chains that are moving, and we're going to talk about that, right? Globally, regionally, what that looks like for your customers. So talk to us about what's happening in the market.
Yes, I think everyone knows that disruption is the new norm. Ever since COVID now, resilience is what people are focused on, and I think that currently we're seeing spikes in air freight. We're seeing ocean freight reliability continuing to fall. Blank sailings continuing. Rates are rising. We're getting up to COVID level of rates, certainly on the Trans-Pacific trade lane. So there's just a lot of moving pieces that our clients need to be informed of and take action to. And I always say to people, when I started the business in 1993, I realized very, very quickly that we weren't in the shipping and transportation business, we were in the information business. And today, I think information is currency.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that Camille said was that you coined the phrase freight architect. What does that actually mean, and where did that come from?
Yeah, so people refer to companies like us as freight forwarders, and I just hate that expression. I don't even know what it means. So I coined the phrase, freight architect. And that means we design solutions that add value to our client supply chains. And we're not just sort of like rinse and repeat, but sort of like look holistically at origin, destination, time scales, suppliers, and come up with a plan that makes sense for our clients. And that's often different from what they were doing previously.
Yeah, it's so true. Whenever somebody asks me, because I don't know if those in the audience know my background, but I grew up in a freight forwarding business. And whenever people ask me what we did, I said that we were a travel agent, for products. Right. Because it was the easiest way for me to reasonably associate it with something that they actually understood and knew.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've heard that analogy before, and I often say to people, but just imagine that you can't get yourself to the airport, and you can't fill in your own custom documents, and you can't get yourself on the plane, and you can't get yourself off the plane, and et cetera, et cetera. So all of those touch points, all of those milestones we're involved with.
Actually, now that you've said that, it's almost like a concierge business, right? Yeah. We're kind of in the concierge business, whether it's white glove or not. You're still having to take that product and do all of the steps to get it to where it needs to go. Anyways, want to give a shout out over to Just Braden, who's watching us over on Instagram. Thanks so much for giving us a shout out. Now it's time to get to our first article. Now this article is really interesting. Now I want to let you all know this is a very long article, but it's definitely worth the read. They cover quite a few different things, and one of the things that they cover is helium and how we have a shortage of helium. You might be wondering, well, what does that have to do with me? Well, first of all, we have a shortage because of the supply chain shocks and what's happening geopolitically with the war. But also helium, which I didn't know, is critical to semiconductor manufacturing, which is the chips that are in every single product that we touch every single day. And so if we have a shortage of that, we're going to have a shortage of chips, which means we're going to have a shortage of the technology products that we use on an everyday basis. Simon, what did you think of this particular article? What stood out for you? I have a couple more that I wanted to point out, but I want to send it over to you first.
Sure. So I think that, what this pointed out to me is the concentration in manufacturing and how that impacts end users. And I think, we've seen so many of these types of situations whereby there's a single point of failure. And right. there's so much helium, and industrial grade helium, which you rightly point out is used in the manufacture of semiconductor chips. But it's so focused, and it's such a narrow supply chain that the impact is outweighed to everything else that's going on around it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And the other thing that I thought was interesting, so they're saying that business schools are doing research about the constant disruption in supply chain. Like Simon, if anything says that we've made it in supply chain, it's that, when there's actually research groups focused on the disruption that's happening in supply chain, because it happens so much and it's a constant for us now, which I thought was really interesting. And I wanted to point that out. But they also talked about how companies are designing their supply chains to withstand disruption over minimizing costs. And so from where you started, Simon, and where I started in the industry, that's quite a flip on its head, because a lot of times supply chains were, you need to minimize costs. Even just a couple of years ago, when I was at a user conference and I was doing some interviews, they were saying how, the top level was pushing them to minimize costs in the warehouse around inventory and things like that. And now we're talking about how supply chains need to be designed to withstand disruption over minimizing costs. I don't know if that's completely taken a hold across the industry, but I thought it was an interesting point.
I think it is interesting, and I think it's something that companies are being forced to look at, because the traditional KPIs are on time, in full, landed costs, cost and speed was sort of like the integral KPIs. And I think and I've read the article as well. The new KPIs are sort of like time to survive and time to recover, and how resilient is your supply chain, and where is the single point of failure? And someone asked me recently, like, what should any CEO be asking their head of supply chain? And the question, the answer that I gave is sort of like, how would our business survive if our main supply was offline for 30 days?
Ooh, that's a great question.
What would the impact be on the business, and how could we deal with it, and how do we recover from it? And I think that's sort of talking to this shift from speed and cost to resilience in the supply chain. Well, and I think that's a lot of what I got from this article.
Yeah, and you got me thinking about something else around cybersecurity as well, because it's not just freight. There's also some single point of failures around cybersecurity and your network and your supplier's network and their technology and how protected they are. And so I think there's a few questions there, is if they do go offline, or if you go offline even for 24 hours, what does that mean, and how do you recover? And I think it's a really, really interesting question. And I think you're right. I think we do need to put pressure on the technology teams and the supply chain teams to answer that question, to make sure that you are future-proofing your supply chains.
Yeah, I mean, people ask me, like, what keeps me up at night? I sleep reasonably well, by the way. But the one thing that keeps me up at night would be a cybersecurity hack. That's like the one thing that I'm conscious of, and I'm constantly looking at. And just because of this online world that we live in today and our reliance on technology. So I think that single point of failure is something that everyone needs to be focused on.
Yeah, love that. Love that. All right. Well, before we get to our second article, and we're going to be talking about hybrid and remote work and all that, let's go to the news desk. So Julian and Diane, what are the top news stories that we need to know today?
Sarah, we've got 3 stories. Carrier strategy, procurement confidence, and a regulation out of China every global shipper needs to read. First up, Nespresso walked away from a single carrier model, and they're telling you exactly why.
Regional and alternative last-mile providers delivered 1.32 billion packages in the U.S. in 2025, up from 424 million just 4 years earlier. Single carrier volume discounts look good on paper.
But one labor disruption, one capacity crunch, and you've broken a promise to your customer.
Nespresso added Jitsu for regional delivery. They built capsule recycling pickups into the same trip, last mile as a brand tool.
Next, Gartner surveyed 101 CPOs. Only 36% say they're very confident they can redesign their teams around AI.
The survey found individual productivity gains from AI, but almost no company-wide impact. The gains are staying at the desk level. They're not moving through the organization.
64% of the people running procurement don't believe they can get there. That's not a technology problem.
That's a workforce redesign problem. The question isn't whether to adopt AI. It's whether your org structure can absorb what comes after you do.
It's one. China China enacted State Council Order 834 on March 31. Authorities can now restrict any foreign company they decide is a threat. Article 15 targets companies that discriminate. Countermeasures extend to your entire corporate group, including PRC subsidiaries. Routine risk management, too. Nearshoring, supplier diversification, centralizing logistics data can now be read as a threat to China's supply chain security.
If you have China-linked manufacturing, sourcing, or logistics, your legal team needs to read Article 13 and Article 15.
Yes, exactly.
Before your next supplier review.
This is not optional. Carrier diversification, AI readiness, and China regulatory exposure.
The decisions you delay are the ones that cost you most.
Sarah, back to you.
That was so interesting. I was reading through some of the stories that they were talking about just now, and the Nespresso one really hit home for me because I've been talking to a lot of last mile companies on the show, and they've been talking about their carrier strategy. Now, in that particular instance, they're talking about, Nespresso is talking about their multi-carrier strategy being tied to their customer experience, and that they would never go back to a single, that they want to be able to have the options, but be able to manage the options well so that it doesn't hurt their customer experience. So I wanted to point that one out because I thought that one was really interesting. Anything stick out from that for you, Simon?
I actually have exactly the same thought on that. I think sort of like the Nespresso story sort of links to what we were saying previously about diversity, having a diverse supply chain and having resilience within that supply chain. And when you have a single supplier, a single point of failure, that puts a real risk not on your business, but on the customer experience. And ultimately, it's all about the customer. It's all about the customer experience and what we deliver to them. So I think that, that really sort of like stood out to me and knitted very nicely with what we were just talking about.
Yeah, well, and I also think if you're doing business with China, definitely go and check out those sections that they were talking about, because they are making some changes to protect their supply chains. All right, let's get to our second article. Now, this article is from a couple of years ago, but it's still relevant today. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that, Simon, because you and I have both brought together our teams and our workforce and our business based on remote work. And we've been able to do it quite successfully. And so this one really stood out for you. Now, talk to us about why, talk to us about this article, and talk to us about how you've been able to build a remote culture.
Sure. So I think let me start by saying everyone needs to recognize that their supply chains are remote. Everything is remote within the supply chain, whether it be their suppliers, truckers, brokers, whatever. Nothing is all in-house. So pre-COVID, we had a very strong work from home program. So when COVID hit, and I sent everyone home March 12th, 2020, which was supposed to be for 2 weeks. But for us, it was like a light switch. All our systems were in the cloud. Everyone was set up at home. And so very early in COVID, it was working so well, I said to everyone, we're never returning to the office, and we haven't. We have a completely distributed workforce. We've hired over the last 6 years. We've retained our staff. And for us, it works really well. What I will say is, it isn't for everybody, and I recognize that. In the same way, but we didn't really have the alternative, in-person wasn't for everybody previously. So we just didn't have the alternative for people. But for individuals and businesses, it isn't for everyone. For us, it works really well. But as you probably know, Sarah, you have to work really hard at it.
You do. And it's interesting, right? A lot of companies are trying to force that hybrid back to work type environment. I think there's pros and cons on both sides. One thing I read the other day, and I don't know if this is true or not, but they said that it's the ego that's kind of driving the hybrid back in person type workforce, because it drives the ego when you've got people in the office and you can speak to them and have meetings and things like that. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I thought it was an interesting point of view that was talked about in an article the other day. But what they're also talking about is how remote work leads to more creativity. And the other really interesting thing that I wanted to point out is that everybody talks about how you measure productivity. And they said it's really hard to measure productivity, whether you're in the office or you're remote anyways. So what's the difference?
100%. I think
your work is going to show it.
100%. I think it's all about outputs. I also think that like those that think that you need to be in the office to ensure people are working, you're not standing over someone 8 hours a day watching them.
And if you are, it's creepy, so don't do that.
Correct. If you are, it's creepy, and it shouldn't. There's something wrong somewhere. I've often said to people, the people who are goofing off at home in a remote environment, they were goofing off in the office. You know, and it's a personality thing, but it's also like how you get treated. And it's like how the company treats you, how they give you a voice, how they keep you informed. And I think, as I said, you have to work at these things, but I think there's a real benefit to it.
Yeah. All right, let's get to our third article. Now, I forgot to mention, we've got a QR code in the top right-hand corner. Go ahead and click that. That's going to give you more information about Jaguar Freight. All right, so our last article, and this was interesting. I think Audrey sent this one to me. And I wanted to point it out because obviously supply chain is global. And so what's happening regionally really matters to what's happening globally, to us here on the ground in North America. Some regulations that are happening in Europe are slowly coming over here. And so you've got to keep your pulse on what's happening in different regions. Now, this particular article talks about in Finland, Customs is going to introduce new levies on cheap online imports. And they actually talked about how it's going to be, they're going to have some extra fees put on products that are ordered by private individuals. And they talked about how it's going to be €3 per product. So if you order socks and some t-shirts or something like that, it's €3 for the socks and €3 for the t-shirts. Now, what did you think about this, Simon? Because this is all about your world.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, you know, we're seeing the slow collapse globally of de minimis as far as a business model is concerned. And I think you had companies like Shine and Temu that built their businesses on this direct to consumer model with what was, I would say, effectively a regulatory loophole with regards to low value goods that the US closed last year and the Europeans are now catching up with. They're not eliminating it yet, although I believe they intend to in the coming years. And I think it's sort of like it's disrupting that business model, and ironically it's driving businesses to sort of like mass consolidation of goods and investing in warehouses in destination countries and driving the demand for warehouse space.
Yeah. Well, and isn't that kind of the point, right? We wanted to drive more regionalization through supply chains, and warehousing and distribution, that creates jobs.
Absolutely. And it creates jobs in the places that you want them, close to the consumer, and in the at the end user, as close as possible to the end user. So absolutely.
Yeah. One other thing that this article talks about is that they're not done yet. Apparently, they're also going to introduce a processing fee, which they haven't said how much that's going to be, in November 2026. So stay tuned, because I think there's a lot of countries watching this model, seeing how it works, seeing the results of it. What does it mean for that country? What does it mean for jobs? What does it mean for ordering? Are we still ordering those products? Are those companies becoming more regional and they're going to open up offices and warehousing that's going to help with the economy? So I think a lot of people are watching, right, Simon?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a moving target. I think we've seen, this current administration in the United States is sort of like changing the world order as far as trade is concerned, and this just comes back to resilience and diversification, and people need to be nimble. I think survival and growth is not the biggest or the largest; those can adapt the quickest.
Yeah, and keep up.
Yes,
Right, Simon?
absolutely.
I mean, it's been an exhausting 2 years, I think.
Yeah. And to your point, it's not stopping.
It's definitely not stopping.
This is the world we now live in.
That's true. All right. Well, make sure that you click the QR code, learn more about Jaguar Freight. Thank you so much to everybody who tuned in this week. I'll be back next week in my home studio. Simon, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a long time in coming, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Bye, everyone.